All right. So this is a little bit of a different video. I'm not playing guitar. I'm going to be talking about guitars. And specifically because I've had some recent experience, some might call it luck, selling some of my old guitars on Reverb. And I've acquired a little bit of knowledge about this, knowledge that I wish I'd had when I first started selling guitars on Reverb. Just wanted to make a short video. Maybe it won't be short. Who knows how long it'll be. I've made a PowerPoint because that's the only way I know how to organize my thoughts, and I don't want to go through the hassle of editing a video properly. So with this, it's pretty plug and play. But here are five guitars that I guess one of them's a bass guitar, that I sold in the past year or so. And I think with each sale, I learned a lesson, some of them more significant than others. Some of them taught me similar lessons along the way. All great guitars that I played. Had to part with them for different reasons. So what I'm going to do is go through each of them as you see them on the screen here, and sort of off the cuff, not terribly off the cuff. I have, slides laid out, but without a proper script, just sort of go through what each guitar kind of taught me with respect to selling on Reverb. So this first lesson is to keep an eye out for scammers, even if you're not the mark. So just in common scam terminology, the mark is the person who's getting scammed. So what do I mean by this? Well, here is the first guitar. And in fact, this is, in an interesting way, both the first guitar that I sold and the most recent guitar that I sold. Not because I only sold this one guitar, but because the first time that this guitar sold, I received from the individual, when I got their shipping address, they'd also sent me a message that said, to leave some particular note with respect to, make sure this goes to locker, XYZ, which I thought was kind of weird that someone was having a guitar of, of this price shipped to a locker. And I searched up the address, and it turned out that this address was to a freight forwarding service in Florida. So, so immediately my alarm started going off. It's like, hey, this isn't someone's residential address. As in the same way that when I order guitars, I order them to a residential address. So it's not plausibly someone's place of work, although maybe they work at the freight forwarding service, but it seems more like they're trying to ship this guitar to this freight forwarding service to then have it shipped elsewhere. So what's going on there? So I did some Googling around, and basically what I arrived at was, and we'll get to whether this was accurate or not later on, but what I arrived at was this was likely someone who had stolen a credit card and was purchasing guitars, with this stolen credit card, and was having them shipped out of the country. That way, once the fraud was uncovered, and perhaps there was a chargeback on the card, or the credit card company, declined the transaction later on, the guitar was already going to be out of the country, and there's no way of getting it back. Part of what gave me some worry at first here was that this was my very first guitar that I had sold, and Reverb did not want to turn over the funds that had been paid until I had properly shipped the guitar out, which is not always the case with Reverb, if I understand correctly. I think because this guitar was over a certain price, I had to have proof, right? The guitar had to be past some point in the shipping process before the funds would be dispersed, which is a policy decision. I'm sure there's some good rationale behind it, but that's the decision. And when I saw this sort of atypical shipping scheme come up, I thought this isn't something I want to deal with. I contacted the individual. I said, hey, you're telling me to do this extra stuff to an address that's not quite the address that you should have on file. I contacted Reverb support, and they said, no, this is fine. You should go through with a sale. And I told them, hey, I read online that people on Reverb have done this sort of scam before. So maybe I'm being a bit more diligent than you are. Can you look into this a bit more deeply? And they said, no, this is fine, and you're protected on your end. All that said and done, though, I still felt like if someone was getting their credit card stolen and used to buy some guitar, and even if they got their, all those fees waived off in the grand scheme of things, they end up not having to be held responsible for the fraudulent charges on their card. I just didn't want to be involved with that. I didn't want to enable someone to make fraudulent charges on a guitar, or on a credit card rather. So I just refunded them, and I said, we're not going to do this sale. So that's the basic story around this guitar. I ended up selling this guitar somewhat more recently, and at a slightly lower price than what I had quote unquote initially sold it for. And we'll get to some of the details here shortly. So this is an awfully product named guitar, Charvel MJ DK24 HSH 2PT mahogany with figured walnut. I did not list it like this on Reverb. I think mine was a Charvel MJ DK24 with walnut top, which is basically what this is. It's one of the slightly newer made in Japan Charvels. The main reason I got this guitar was, one, I'm a sucker for natural wood looks, but specifically the Wenge neck. I had always wanted to try a Wenge neck because it's just more, has more raw feel, and it's very porous, and it just looks cool. And, part of what I've enjoyed from buying guitars on Reverb is exploring different kinds of, not quite gimmicks, but things that aren't standard on a lot of guitars. Buying a 7-string guitar, buying a multi-scale guitar, buying a guitar with a Wenge neck. I'd already had a guitar with, an HSH setup, a guitar with a Goto 510 before, so I've had super strats, but nothing quite like this. So that's why I bought this guitar. I originally purchased this guitar from someone else on Reverb, and it was about $1,800. That was the purchase price, so that is what it was listed for on Reverb. Of course, after that, you have shipping charges and taxes on top of that. But just for the basic comparison here, just to show kind of appreciation or depreciation. Spoiler alert: most of these are depreciation. I just want to put the purchase price as shown on Reverb here, and this was in November 2021. And so I sold this guitar for $1,725 in March of 2026, at the time that I'm posting this video. And nominally, this was a $75 loss, but once you factor in the Reverb seller fees on the selling side and all the taxes and shipping I paid on the purchasing side, this actually ended up being an actual net loss of $358. Which looks bad at first blush, but if you consider that I had this guitar for 5 years, you could think of it as, hey, I leased this guitar for 5 years, and it cost me $358, which really isn't a bad deal in the grand scheme of things. Of course, I invested some strings. I don't think this guitar really required any additional work as far as maintenance and all of that. I mean, I think I polished the frets maybe once or twice, but that it wasn't like a refret or anything, or a crowning. It was just keeping them shiny, keeping them smooth. So not a bad guitar. And the reason I got rid of this guitar is I just wasn't playing it as much as some other guitars that I had purchased recently. I won't get too far in the details there, but it just it was collecting dust more than it was getting played. I wasn't a big fan of the pickups of the Seymour Duncans in there, and of course, you could always swap the pickups out, but again, the fact that I wasn't playing it, just based on the feel of it, and because I wasn't a big fan of the pickups, I'd rather not mess with it and just keep it stock. And that way, because I was thinking of reselling it, it's easier to resell stock because people know what they're getting into, right? If you've watched videos about this guitar, the sounds that you're hearing in the video are going to be roughly similar to what you're getting, when you buy this guitar, as opposed to if I put DiMarzios in there or something else, it would have a very different sound. So that's why I left the guitar stock. That's why I sold it. A great guitar. I think the person who bought it got a really good deal on it at $1,725, probably looking around like $1,900 after their shipping and tax fees. But a good guitar overall, one I highly recommend. The one thing I don't like about this guitar is that it says it has a walnut top. I don't think it's a walnut top, and I'll say it's not a walnut top. It looks like a walnut veneer. Like a maybe a paper thin piece of walnut that looks really great, but it's not a say an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch walnut top. It is just it's cosmetic primarily, which is great. It looks cool. It looks different than normal mahogany, but it's not a walnut top as I would call it. And I would say that I would not call things like stickers or veneers tops proper. I think a top should be reserved. That sort of terminology should be reserved for solid pieces of wood. So here I have listed the quote-unquote scam selling price. That is what the initial buyer had bought it for when I had the guitar listed higher. That was at $1,980. So that would have been a potential profit, in the grand scheme of things, at least from the listing price. And actually I had this, so the way I put the number here is actually based on what I actually paid and what I actually would have sold it for, what my net would have been. So this would have been plus $47, which would have been great for me. But because there is this kind of gray area, possible ickiness going on with it, being addressed to a port forward or a freight forwarding service, I decided not to. So was this really a scam? Well, in hindsight, probably not. So what I did is I had looked at this individual's Reverb profile, and at the time, it was an interesting history. It reminded me of some other scam profiles that I'd seen where they would have a lot of feedback, but it would be from companies that did very high volume. So some very large retailers that also had Reverb stores. It could be very easy. If I were a scammer, I could buy a $6 or $7 pack of picks, a couple dozen times from these big retailers. And I can build up good feedback that way. They didn't have any selling feedback, which is, even if they're functioning as a buyer for you, you'd still like to see that they have selling feedback, because you build a lot more reputation as a seller, as someone who's, shipping a guitar and, working with the buyer in that way, as opposed to just someone who's throwing money at a product. So this person had a lot of transactions in a very short amount of time, which is kind of weird, because like one who has all that money to keep buying gear over and over, maybe someone who's rich and that's why they were willing to buy to pay the bigger price. But in this case, some alarms are going off. What I've done after searching this person's Reverb name and actually finding a similar name on in a Facebook, I guess it's a business page, is that it seems like they are importing guitars from the U.S. and maybe other areas, and then selling them in their native country, which is a South American country. I didn't do that much digging. And maybe it's just cheaper, or they avoid taxes in some way by working with the freight forwarding service, as opposed to just saying, hey, ship it to this country. I only ship my guitars to continental US, and that's just to avoid problems with shipping internationally and having to deal with customs and taxes of that sort, and just the problems that come with shipping a guitar that very far and probably getting banged up along the way. I pack my guitars nicely, but I don't like to stress test my packing job by sending it to Alaska or sending it to Hawaii or sending it to a different country entirely. So that's why I only do continental US. And maybe this is a reliable way this person has gotten guitars from the US without any damage. That's all fine and dandy. It's just not the way that I wanted to sell my guitars. So was this really a scam? In hindsight, probably not. It's probably just someone who had worked out a way to get the guitars and gear that they wanted in a slightly circuitous way that I think in a gray area might skirt around some of Reverb's policies. Do I regret my decision in retrospect, having gone through this experience and seen that, hey, maybe this person wasn't a scammer after all? No, I don't. Like I said, I don't think that this was it was not a kind of transaction I wanted to deal with this sort of mix up at the last second with, hey, make sure that the shipping label says XYZ. Listen, but if it's not what's on your address, I'm not going to change anything. And that's mainly for legal liability reasons, right? If it goes somewhere else, Reverb says, hey, you're supposed to ship it here, but you did something different with the shipping label. That's not kosher. So will I do business with individuals who use forwarding addresses in the future? Probably not. Again, it's just too much of a headache. It's much easier just to ship it to a residential address, or someone who works at a business. One of these guitars I'll get to later on was shipped to someone who at their work. I just did a quick internet search. This person had a slightly unusual name, and I was able to find that they worked in a particular school system in the city where the shipping label was addressed to. So that kind of checked out. They're just having it shipped to the school that they work at. That makes sense. So that's that with the Charvel. Lesson 2, some guitars attract a lot of tire kickers. And given that, you just kind of have to roll with it. So first, what is a tire kicker? Well, a tire kicker, comes from the automobile, maybe not the industry, but just the fact that when you're selling a car or a vehicle, you're going to attract a lot of attention, a lot of people. And some of these people will kick the tires when they come to look at the car. Why are they doing that? Well, it is at least the very minimum sort of superficial way they can show interest or show that they're sort of inspecting the car. But oftentimes it's used as a pejorative to waste someone's time. Hey, this person's just here to kick the tires and throw you a lowball offer. And they're not really a serious buyer. Now, I didn't have unserious buyers per se with this guitar. They're not tire kickers in that sense, but I did have a lot of people reach out with questions and offers about this guitar. So this is a Fender Eric Johnson thin line Strat that was reliced by a previous owner. So I did buy this on Reverb in May of 2022. I purchased it for just under $1,300, which I mean for a American made Strat, let alone a Fender Eric Johnson thin line Strat, I think that's a good price. I felt pretty good at this price. The relic job didn't worry me all that much, based on the photos that the owner had from their listing. A little scuffed paint and some nicks in the wood never did anything bad. Prior to this, I'd owned and still own a Fender Ventera. I always mix up if it's a 60s or a 70s, but a road worn, so a Fender, one of their versions of distressed or relic guitars. And I didn't mind it. I love the rougher neck. I really hate the really thick lacquer on maple fretboard guitars that Fender often does. And so the fact that this had all the lacquer stripped off, it wasn't going to be sticky, it was going to be a lot smoother. That was actually a selling point for me. So that's why I got this guitar. I ended up selling it in October of 2025 for $1,000. So nominally, I lost $275, but as a matter of fact, I ended up losing around $500 in the grand scheme of things. Now, of course, I say I lost $500. These aren't investments. I'm not trying to make money on these. Going back to the Charvel example, you could say that I, quote unquote, leased this guitar for, let's say 3.5 years. Yeah, we'll say 3.5 years for $500. And to be sure, I didn't get as much value, as much joy, fun out of this guitar as I did with the Charvel. It always just, there's something that didn't quite click with me. And I really wanted a thin line Strat. I had wanted a semi-hollow for a while. And I love Eric Johnson, so I know he knows how to design a guitar. The pickups on this were great, but the neck was always just something weird. Maybe that had to do with the relicking job, but the neck never felt quite right to me. And I love the neck on my Ventera, we'll call it a Ventera 60s Strat. So that's why I parted with this one. I had a Strat I already liked. This wasn't doing anything new for me, and I figured I'd just part with it, get some change in my back pocket, maybe buy something else. So the lesson here was tire kickers. So I had 12 unique inquiries on this, which some of you may be watching this, you're seasoned Reverb sellers, and you think 12, that's no big deal. I get 12 a day. And if so, great. You're more experienced. You have, more resilience than I do. And to be sure, I'm not saying these tire kickers were difficult to deal with, but this guitar, more than any other, attracted a lot of attention. I had 9 different people message me with questions about the guitar. Some were just for more pictures. Some were questions just about the overall condition. And we'll get to sort of why that is in a second. In 3, separate from people who messaged me, 3 unique individuals who offered me somewhat serious offers. I mean, it wasn't like a $10 offer. And so part of why I think this is because this guitar is not just its use, but it's relict. And people are naturally curious, okay, well, this is a relic guitar. It's worn down. But is that just a euphemism for it being a beat up and damaged guitar, which I totally get. When I first purchased this guitar, I was content with the photos that I saw on the original listing. I didn't ask for any additional photos. Maybe I should have. But I didn't. So I posted. I knew people would be somewhat interested in seeing more of the guitar. The fact with the relic guitar is that you can only show so much. The whole guitar has little pits and dings here and there. And to show every single one of these would easily go over Reverb's picture limit. I think I posted as many pictures as I was allowed to on Reverb when this was up. But of course, people, I put in the description, please message me if you want additional photos. I was more than happy to provide additional photos. And just doing that, I think, also invites people to get in contact. Because getting in contact with someone, contact is the starting point for a lead. A lead is can become an offer, and an offer can become a sale. So the more, sort of feet in the door that I can get from people, even if it's just them saying, hey, can I get more pictures? That at least, helps to build up a relationship and can maybe get a sale in the long run. So here's just a couple of things people asked about. So some people wanted more pictures of the relicking job on the, I guess this is the upper bout. I hear people call the upper bout and lower bout, varying things, back and forth things. Some people call the upper bout the lower bout and vice versa. I'll call this the upper bout just because it's sort of up. when you're seated with the guitar. But in any case, here's a picture I sent. And usually I'd send a number of these pictures. People would ask, hey, do you have more pictures? And I'd send them quite a few of them. And in fact, as more people ask me for photos, person A asks for photos of, let's say this horn and this, part of the guitar. I already have taken those in virtue of them asking for them. That way, when person B reaches out and says, hey, do you have more photos? Plus, I want to see, say, where the neck meets the body, where the sort of heel is, for example. I could send them also the photos I'd sent person A, even though person B didn't ask for those. And that just helps to, help build the relationship. Say, hey, here's some other things you didn't ask for, but I have them available. And that helps the buyer have a better sense of what the guitar looks like, even if they didn't ask for that in the first place. Some buyers also asked about the case because this guitar came with a hard shell case, a very nice hard shell case, I should add. That is easily, I think, worth $200 just by itself. Plus the certificate of authenticity and some case candy, all of which I had from the original owner. And one person even asked, hey, can you check under the pick guard to make sure that the original pickups are there? Because sometimes people will take a very nice guitar, replace it with the cheap Squire pick guard, and then just basically sell the good pickups, parted out effectively. Fortunately, that was not the case. I didn't think that would be the case for this one, just because that story, I'm sure it happens. It seems like a very unlikely thing, especially with a guitar like this, like an Eric Johnson. Like no one's stealing Eric Johnson pickups. People are probably stealing like the Evos out of Gems, and other signature guitars and things like that. No one's really stealing Eric Johnson's single coils, I would imagine. But I had to take the strings off and unscrew the pick guard and had to send this picture. This one almost materialized in a sale, but at last second the potential buyer said, we couldn't meet. I think it was around a $50 gap that we couldn't bridge. And I said, hey, this is what I'm comfortable asking right now. I'm still getting some messages from people, which I was, I wasn't lying. I was getting a lot of interest in this guitar, as evidence from the previous slide. And they said, well, I can't do it. Maybe they were holding out for me, but within a week, someone else had reached out. I think I sent them some additional pictures. They said, great. They paid what I was asking. Didn't even offer me anything lower, which I probably would have taken at that time, and sold the guitar. So that is that for Stratocaster and tire kickers. Lesson 3, don't skimp on packaging and shipping. So the way this is phrased, it may seem that I shipped a guitar and it got damaged. Fortunately, that's not the case. But rather, maybe the better way to put this lesson is, I didn't even renumber the lesson. The better way to put this lesson is make sure you know how much it's going to cost to ship and pack the guitar when you put the ad up initially. So let's talk through this. This is a Fender FSR Blackout Mustang bass. This was kind of a weird, it's an FSR, so it's a limited edition item by Fender. I bought this because I was looking for a short scale bass. This looked really cool. It had a matching black headstock, which I really liked. And I just needed a small bass to play because I wanted to track some bass parts in my bedroom studio. So I got this, and it was great. I maybe got 3 hours out of overall playtime out of it. It sat unused for a long time. I tried to look up where I bought this bass, and I simply couldn't. I even tried going to my bank's credit card statements history to see, it was back in 2019 or 2020 when I bought this, and my bank would not show me my 2019 and 2020 credit card statements. So who knows? I'm pretty sure. I think 80% sure that I bought this from Z-Zounds or Zounds, however it's pronounced. When I tried to open up the Zounds page, it said I didn't have an account there, which maybe I was able to check out without making an account, and it didn't store my order history. Who knows? Now, I don't think that this cost $950 when I bought it. I thought I paid closer to like $650 or $700, and I bought it new because I have the original Fender box. It came in and all the case candy and everything. It didn't come in a case, but you know what I mean, the hang tags and whatnot. Now, I don't think this cost me $950. I really don't, but that's the only thing I could find as far as what the price for this was an old Guitar Center ad. As you know, it shows out of stock, but it has the price listed as $950. So maybe I paid $950. Let's say I did. The price doesn't really matter. I ended up selling this for $1,000 in December of 2025. However, I decided that I needed to ship this in a hard shell case. And I guess the better way to put that is I decided that I didn't want to risk shipping this just in the box that it came in. Fender, somewhat magically, the box they shipped this in is very tiny. This base just fit. I'm sure it came with a lot of nice packaging that I promptly threw away because it was taking up space in my room. And, I kept the box. That was enough for me. But I didn't want to ship this, in just in the box that it came in. So I had an old hard shell bass case that I had just from an old bass guitar that was gifted to me that has ended up somewhere else at this point. So I just had a bass guitar case. And so I paired the hard shell case with this. And I kind of thought I could pull one over on UPS. Now, I did weigh it correctly. And the weight was, I can't even remember the number, but it was a significant weight. However, because the bass guitar was now in a bass case, that increased the dimensions of it substantially. I even had to have packaging around the bass case just to be, super careful that the bass case didn't get damaged. Now, I'm pretty sure I flubbed I got a little creative with what I put the dimensions as on a Reverb. And so when you sell on Reverb, if you don't know this, it's often the most economical to to buy the shipping label through Reverb, even if you're using, say, UPS. UPS is what I primarily use through Reverb, because they get, I think, special rates because they're, they provide a lot of business to UPS, better than if I individually told UPS, hey, I have a box of, XYZ dimensions and N pounds. I can get it better through Reverb. Now, I was fairly certain they would weigh the box. I didn't think they'd check every dimension of it, which I guess they do. So what ended up happening is what I said the dimensions were not what they measured the dimensions at. And I got a nice little email from Reverb really about a month after I thought this transaction was just over. And they said, hey, UPS told us, I'm paraphrasing here, but UPS told us the dimensions you gave weren't correct, and they've been adjusted based on UPS's rate, and we're going to invoice you for an extra $100. And I said, okay. I can't fight that. I was a little upset, but I knew I wasn't completely honest with UPS, and I thought I could pull one over. And it turns out you pay the price when you live life dangerously. So all that to say, even if you're offering free shipping, which I usually don't do, I usually have calculated shipping. And if I do use direct offers, I'll usually put shipping at 100, and I'll leave a little note, give me your zip code. That way I can send you an offer with accurate or more accurate shipping, because most people don't need $100 shipping. So just be wary of how you'll be packaging the guitar that you're selling, and make sure you have a box and packaging and everything that is kosher, all within UPS standards. Lesson 4. This is quite the lesson. This is maybe just a general lesson about selling anything in life. The market is fickle, but sometimes that means you profit. This in lesson 5 will be sort of two sides of the same coin. Namely, that the market is fickle. This is the good side. Sometimes you profit. So this is a Fender American Acoustasonic Telecaster. Note, this is the American Acoustasonic, not one of the newer player Telecasters that I believe are made in their Mexico factory. So I somehow, just miraculously, I purchased this for $810. That's the listing price in April of 2025. That was on Reverb. The reason I got one of these was because a band that I quite like, Magdalena Bay, I've done a couple covers of them on this channel already. One of the members, Matt, he was playing I don't know if it was a Tele, but I think it was one of their Jazzmaster models, an Acoustasonic Jazzmaster. And it looked really cool. Looked like a lot of fun. I'd seen some of the hype around it back when Fender was really pushing this. And I thought, I should just try this out for once. And if I like it, great. It's, $800 isn't too much to throw on a guitar, especially if I end up liking it. It's an acoustic, kind of like a portable acoustic in a sense. So if I like it, that's great. It beats having to lug out, the $2,000 Taylor and having to mic that up or even use the onboard preamp for that. I wanted to explore some of the the modeling that EQ modeling, however they market it themselves, that Fender had pushed in this guitar. It was all right. Nothing that really stood out to me. I can never quite get the feel for this guitar. The neck, it one, acoustically it didn't sound great, and two, it didn't feel as comfortable as a normal acoustic. Tried different gauge strings. I didn't want to mess with the bridge too much and mess with the action. This was just a guitar where I tried it a little bit, didn't quite work for me, so I figured I'd turn it right back around on Reverb. And so I bought it in April 2025, and I think I put it on the market back in August or September of 2025. So I held on to it for about 4 months before I said, hey, this is going on the market. I'm not touching this again. I ended up selling it for $950 in January of 2026. And that's not just a plus in the sale price and like the listing price, but actually net, once you take into account Reverb seller fees and the shipping that I paid when I originally purchased it, I still netted $50, which is pretty cool. So how was I able to do this? Well, because the market forces allowed me to. Someone wanted to pay $950 plus fees, etc., for this particular guitar. Whereas back in April 2025, no one wanted to pay that, but I was willing to pay $810 for it. So what changed about the market? Maybe demand resurged. Maybe there was a bit of atrophy, or maybe it had been overdone. All the hype had been overhyped at the time about the Fender Acoustasonics, and maybe hype built back up, or maybe I really don't know. Maybe everyone else saw Matt from Magdalena Bay playing an Acoustasonic and thought, hey, I want to buy one of those. Maybe it's because there's few of this color. Maybe there were more of this color on the market when I originally bought it, and so competition wise, people wanted red ones. I just got the cheapest one, and now that there's fewer crimson red ones, maybe you can charge a little bit more. At this point, when this guitar sold, I was pricing all of the guitars that I had listed, which is not necessarily all the guitars in this video. I was pricing them to move, so I was pricing them really the cheapest or tied with the cheapest on Reverb, sometimes hoping that the quality of my photos would help it stand out and people would pick it over another one that might have had the same price but slightly worse photos in my estimation. Now, there are some confounds with this, and I'll actually have a funny slide after this. Because I was selling this after they'd already released the player Acoustasonics, some people looking at the market may have thought, oh, well, I'm just, if I want an Acoustasonic, I'm going to get the player version because in the grand scheme of things, sure, one's made in Mexico, one's made in the US, but the player one is newer. Maybe it's more refined design-wise, but I'm just going to go for that one. And those are cheaper than the American Acoustasonics for sure, but maybe someone who's looking for an American Acoustasonic, like I did, I wanted a made in USA guitar. Maybe they're just willing to splurge a little bit more. So here is I can only describe as a funny message that I got, because this is someone who sent me an offer. I can't even recall the amount because it wasn't comically low. I mean, it might have been $650, which is low, but you get lowball offers on Reverb. And conceivably, sometimes lowball offers work. $650 isn't awful for an Acoustasonic. I mean, on my worst day, I might have accepted it, but certainly not at the time when I saw it. So I think I promptly declined it, or I ignored it. And this person, I don't know, looking over their checklist of all of the guitars that they'd sent offers on, went out of their way to say, apologies for the lowball. I'm making offers on Player Series and realized I made an offer on your American Acoustasonic. You're welcome to decline. I honestly prefer one that's not rechargeable. Sorry about that. So this person kind of felt ashamed that their offer was so low in their eyes. I just sent a message back and said, hey, it's no big deal. I get lowball offers all the time. I didn't take it personally. Best of luck finding a player Acoustasonic. So market's fickle. You got different people looking for different things. Sometimes your guitar, your listing falls right in their crosshairs and it works. Sometimes, they're shooting for something else and you end up in the crosshairs nonetheless. Lesson 5, the final lesson. Even pricing to move can take time. Selling is a waiting game. So this is the double end of the other side of the coin where the market is fickle. It can change. Market forces can sometimes benefit you. Sometimes they don't benefit you. Sometimes it's a real detriment. And you just have to wait and price a guitar far below what you want to sell it at if you want it to move. So this is really a great guitar. And I don't think I'm upset that the guitar sold for as low as it did. I try not to price guitars or accept offers on guitars that are so low that I feel like I haven't gotten what it's worth. This one might be on the cusp, but I'm content with the deal. So this is an Ibanez S1070 PBZ Cerulean Blue. I think this is part of sort of like the first run of these. They made a couple refinements in future versions of this in subsequent years, but nothing terribly substantial really. I've always been a fan of the Ibanez S series. I had been holding off for so long that they would finally add stainless steel frets to the S Prestige models. They just haven't, or at least at the time when I was looking to buy another S, they hadn't. And I wanted an updated S. This came with really great DiMarzio pickups, I think the Air Norton and the Tone Zone, and a True Velvet in the middle. So that's, sort of MSRP, $300 worth of pickups right there. Plus it had like an 11-piece neck. It kind of had not quite Wenge. I think it was Panga Panga, or maybe Panga Panga was the fretboard. But between the fretboard and the neck, it was very open, sort of like raw satin, like open pore style, which I really liked because I think I'd already bought in the Charvel prior to this one. I really liked that neck feel. So I thought this will be a great move up. This is a really great guitar. If anyone wants like a great super strat, it's somewhat thin, maybe too thin for most people, this is a great super strat. Like you can play anything shreddy you want on this guitar. Stainless steel frets, not the greatest quality stainless steel, but still super smooth. Nothing like a Parker or like a Strandberg stainless steel, but still great stuff. I purchased this for around $1,000 in July of 2023 on Reverb, and I sold it for $950 in February of 2026. So nominally $50 difference, actually net after fees, etc., as I've been saying, down $265. So I had this guitar for about 2.5 years. Thought I had it much longer. I enjoyed this guitar. Only reason I sold it was because I was playing some of my other guitars, my more expensive guitars that I bought recently, over this one, and I just didn't need it. And $1,000, if I could get $1,000 for it, I could put that towards something else and maybe build up towards another slightly higher end guitar. Really, just a lot of what I was doing here with these 5 sales and some other sales that I've had was get rid of some of my lower end guitars that I accumulated that were at one time high end guitars for me when I wasn't making as much money, and start to sort of build a nest egg. Get rid of 3 of these to get one much nicer guitar. Which is probably what I'll be doing here soon enough. I might have maybe a cover coming up soon that has one of those. So this guitar sat on the market for 8 months. I originally listed it around $1,100, which was ambitious. Even when I listed it, it wasn't priced to move. It was above some other ones, but I thought I was pretty good with the camera. These pictures would stand out. On Reverb, my store name is Casey's Yard Sale, and why I name it that is because I have all these pictures of the guitars in my yard. So I think that adds some character to it, some uniqueness to it. But yeah, this was here on the market for 8 months, and it was frequently undercut by other newer sellers. So after about 3 months on the market, I thought, okay, this isn't really moving. I should price it more aggressively, price it toward the bottom of the pack, even though it was in great condition. I think I have it listed as this one might have been listed at good, or whatever is just below excellent on Reverb. I can't recall off the top of my head. It had some buckle rash on. It was more so on the back plate than it was on the finish on the back. But I don't think I would put this as excellent in the way that I would expect an excellent guitar to be. So it had that working against it, but more so what I saw, and I monitored this guitar quite a bit because I think this was the first guitar that I put up when I was first beginning my Reverb journey. It was frequently the case that I would log on maybe once a week just to check, how much an S1070 is going for that week. And there'd usually be a guitar or two that were like $25 under mine that were newer listings. So what they were doing was, what someone who wants to move their guitar would do was they saw, hey, what's the market? What's the lowest, price being demanded at the time? I'm going to put mine below that. That way mine sells more quickly. Mine sells before theirs do. Whoever's looking for this guitar buys mine and not this other person's. So I get that. I just didn't realize I have to be as vigilant as I needed to be with this particular guitar. And in fact, why this guitar ended up selling is because this ended up being the cheapest guitar, the cheapest version of this guitar on Reverb for quite a while. I think for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, but at least 2 or 3 weeks. And I think maybe another listing came up that matched my price for a while, but I don't think it sold before mine. So mine was up there for a while, eventually sold, which is great. And it just took a while to move this guitar. There's nothing else to say about it. I could have priced it more aggressively. But again, this was the bare minimum I wanted to sell this guitar for. I think it was worth $950, as a sale price. Of course, I maybe netted like $860, $850 after reverb fees and whatnot. So, it is what it is. Someone got a great guitar for a great price. And part of why I also was content selling this guitar is because, well, if it's selling for this low, assuming there isn't any crazy change in the market, and there's a lot of these on Reverb, and if I end up pining for this guitar again, I can just buy another one back on Reverb. Hopefully it's not in awful condition, and everything will be nice. So sometimes you have to play the waiting game, and that's just how the market is. And on the note on the waiting game, I do have a couple of other guitars that, one of which has been sitting for quite a while, another one not quite as long. And I just kind of wanted to take the last part of this video to reflect on what could be going on with these current listings that haven't moved yet. So here's Bachelor number 1. Bachelor number 1 is a Strandberg Prog 7 with poplar burl top. So there's a million Strandberg Prog 7s out there. What's so neat about this one? Well, the poplar burl top, obviously. So this was a Guitar Center / Musician's Friend exclusive. Yeah. And so I bought this new from Musician's Friend in April of 2021. This was a birthday present I bought for myself. This was at the time the most expensive guitar I had ever bought, at $2,500, sale price plus, I think after taxes it was closer to 27 something or other. But it was a guitar that I wanted. I wanted to try a Strandberg. I wanted to try a multi-scale. I wanted to try a roasted maple neck. I wanted to try a 7-string. Actually, I think I had a 7-string before this one, the Charvel DK Nova. Wasn't a big fan. That's a different video. But I wanted to try this, and it's a fine guitar. I'm not as big a fan of the 20-inch radius. That's and maybe the Swamp Ash body. I'm not a big fan of Swamp Ash. I know it's a really a lot of people like Swamp Ash. It's just not for me. I think it's just the way to put it. It just doesn't sound right to me. I like my mahogany body and maple tops, or mahogany body and whatever. Even alder. I love alder, but I can't do Swamp Ash. Just something about the frequency for it is just not quite it for me. So I originally priced this guitar around $2,700, maybe $2,800 is what I had it at, thinking, well, this is a limited edition guitar. There's nothing else like this on Reverb, and since I originally listed it back in summer of 2025, there's maybe been 1 or 2 of the similar kind of limited edition Musician's Friend Guitar Center run that have been on Reverb. I think both have sold, unfortunately for me. But there aren't a lot of these, so I thought, it's limited edition. I could probably charge a premium for it, maybe make my money back on it. As of yet, has not been the case, and currently this is listed at $2,250. So taking a $250 nominal cut off the top, of course, after fees and what I paid in taxes and shipping initially, it'll probably be close to like $500 if I were to sell it at $2,250. So some of the perks, like what I think this guitar has going for it, it's a limited edition model, as I mentioned. This might actually be working against it in some ways. We'll get to that in a second. There's few competitors, as I mentioned. I haven't seen this exact spec come up on Reverb since I've listed the guitar. And I think even if you check sold listings for this guitar, well, it's another problem, but we'll get to that in a second. This exact spec isn't here, which is to say, when Guitar Center Musician's Friend did this run, there were 2 things that you could change. One was whether you had a roasted maple fretboard or an ebony fretboard. I got the ebony one, and you could get it with this sort of natural I don't think it's quite a clear coat, but it's a a clear finish. You see this sort of natural poplar burl, or you could get something of like a violin sunburst style kind of thing on it. I didn't quite care for it. But so I got the natural finish and the ebony board, which I haven't seen too many of. Maybe this is just an unpopular combination, but it's at least a unique model. There's nothing that Strandberg makes that is like this now. They make a Prog 7 with an ebony fretboard, but they don't make one with a sort of a poplar top. And moreover, they've cut back on using roasted maple necks as well. So this is kind of part of a bygone era. This is still this might be Korea, it might be Indonesia. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head. So it's not one of the USA Strandbergs. It's not one of those ones that fetches like 5,000 and up, because it's one of the OG Strandbergs, as it were. But still one of a slightly earlier era. And that kind of gets into what may be working against it. So maybe to jump around in this cons point a bit, it may be seen as outdated. Strandberg has refined many aspects of their base design since this model released, both with their bridge, their headstock. I believe the Fishmans have remained relatively the same. Some con is that when I bought this, Strandberg, at least in my perception, was a very hot brand, and thus they could charge a lot. However, at this time, I think everyone who has heard of Strandberg and wanted to try a Strandberg has tried a Strandberg. And so there's maybe less curiosity and thus less demand behind Strandberg guitars. So maybe brand fatigue is kind of softening the market here. Just one speculation. Another con is what I have here listed as SEO limit, or like a search engine optimization limit. So this particular limited edition model, does not have an entry on Reverb. I could create one. I don't think it would help me maybe in the grand scheme of things. So I had this listed under a Strandberg Prog 7 generally, or maybe like whatever their first run of them, or their first major production run of them are. So it might be like Prog 7 2019 through 2022, or, one of those cases where it's listed with a date range. So I have it listed under there because it does follow those specs, except for the poplar top. So I think I have in my title as well with poplar burl top. So maybe the fact that it's somewhat unique in this way, no one is maybe looking for this guitar because it was unique to a certain pair of retailers. Maybe just the right person wants this guitar but hasn't found it yet, or they don't know that they want it yet. They're not willing to pay it. And on that note, I've had one bite on this guitar, and they backed out last minute. This was an offer for $20. This was back when I might have had it slightly higher. It might have been at 2,500, may have been slightly lower. But I had an offer for $2,450. And I think this was when I was doing direct offers. So I sent everyone a $2,450. It had expired for one person, but then they sent me a message, hey, can you resend the offer? And I'll accept it immediately. And then I didn't get back to them I didn't see the message and get back to them until, say, like 18 hours later. I sent the offer and they said, sorry, I just bought something else with the money I was going to spend on this. Sorry to be a bother. And I said, no big deal. Hope you got something you liked. So I missed out on that just in virtue of having a busy day one day and not getting to my messages as quickly as I would have liked to in retrospect. So now I've taken even more of a haircut and hopefully I get something here. I think this guitar is priced fairly. I think this is a fair price. Could I go lower? Would I accept lower? Maybe. I wouldn't go below 2. That's for certain. I don't know that I'd go below 21. Given the day, given how I'm feeling, given how long this still stays on Reverb without any bites or without any attention, maybe I'll accept a lower offer, but I don't see this price going up anytime soon. So we'll see. That's Bachelor number 1. Bachelor number 2 is a entirely different beast. So this is a PRS Chleo 2025 charcoal purple burst. This is the guitar that broke the internet for some time in 2025, towards the beginning of 2025. So this is the Herman Lee. I don't even have it listed here in the title. This is the Herman Lee signature model, the long-awaited Herman Lee signature model from PRS. The core model, the built-in USA one, not to be confused with the SE that they released. That's hovering around at a $2,000 price point currently, at least MSRP. I was super lucky enough to purchase this from Sweetwater in June of 2025 for $6,850. I did not receive the guitar until maybe October of 2025. Maybe might have actually been November of 2025. So it was quite a wait, but I eventually got it. In fact, my sales representative that I spoke with, he said that there were, at the time when I was put on the list, there were enough people in front of me that if they all, kept to the list and ended up buying, stayed in line and bought the guitar, that I would not be able to get one. So all their spots were accounted for, but I was still on the waiting list. Well, it turns out enough people pulled out, perhaps because the SE came out in the meantime and people were fine just getting the SE instead, that I was able to, the option was given to me that I could purchase this. And, Herman Lee, Guitar Hero 3 through Fire and Flames, that's how I got into guitar. Like a lot of people have been following Dragon Force ever since. They're one of my favorite bands. So I had to get this. So why am I listing it? Well, I'm currently asking $18,000 for it. And this is just, this is where I really want to be candid. This guitar, I wouldn't mind having a $7,000 guitar. Let's just call this a $7,000 guitar. I wouldn't, I'd be afraid of like bumping it and, the value being lost over time. But that's just, that's just something that happens. When I started seeing this guitar going for quite expensive, in the far in excess of its MSRP, $10,000, $15,000. That's when I started to think, this is too much guitar for me. If I can, to be candid, if I could make money on this, I'd rather wait until a core model comes out that isn't super crazy expensive, or if it's just like this, but it's maybe slightly cheaper, or it's just not the limited edition 1 of 100, etc. Right? This is a collector guitar in many ways. I could use this as a player guitar. I think that would be a waste. I think someone else would get more value, more appreciative value out of this as a collector guitar than I would. So, of course, I just wanted to own this guitar to see what is it like, right? There's so much hype built around it. Like everyone else, I see the videos on the internet. Some of my favorite YouTubers playing it. So, what is it like? And I'll be honest, I haven't put a lot of hours on it because I don't want to scratch it or mess it up or anything like that because I am trying to sell it. It feels really nice. I love the pickups in it. I love the Omniforce pickups. It doesn't quite feel like a shredder to me, if that sounds weird. But maybe that's because I'm used to, the super thin Ibanez. I have Herman's original Ibanez eGen 18 model, which just feels much nicer in my hands than this one does. It's just a difference of taste, and it's really all it is. And because this is more of a collector guitar, I'm asking a collector price. So some perks about this, what this guitar has going for it is I can get my money back on this for sure. If I put this down to $7,000, of course, with taxes on a $6,850 guitar, it's definitely more than $7,000. But if I listed whatever I paid all in all for this guitar, I'd get my money back easily. I'd probably get my money back plus $1,000 pretty easily. But because this is a limited edition and I've never really owned a collector guitar before, I do kind of want to see where I can take this. Am I scalping the guitar? Maybe this isn't a sort of limited resource in the same way that like concert tickets are scalped and you sort of deprive someone of an experience that they could otherwise get to. So I feel comfortable this is a collector's item. I was lucky enough to stumble onto it. I paid the upfront cost, so I'm going to try and get some money out of it. And currently on Reverb, there are a few competitors. I believe currently among U.S. sellers, I am the lowest listed at $18,000. I'm tied with someone else. I think I've been floating some direct offers for around $17,000. But as of now, that's sort of where my price point is. So the perks is that this is a very hyped model. Some cons, this is an expensive model, right? If you're buying into the hype, you're putting up quite a bit of money. And possibly the hype might have died down already. So a lot of the sales of this guitar occurred when, a lot of the sales of this guitar on Reverb occurred back to back with one another. And they were going for around $10,000. I think in the next slide, I actually have a sort of compendium of these. But maybe the hype has died down because they've released the SE version. No one really wants to buy the more expensive core version, even if it is super cool, limited edition, 1 of 100 for this particular color. And another con I didn't even mention here, a lot more people responded to the positively to the Orchid Dust, the sort of pinker variant of this guitar, rather than this purple one, charcoal purple. So maybe I just have the wrong version of this guitar. Whatever the case, you know, it's the right guitar for someone. Is it at the right price point? Time will tell. It's been up for maybe 2 or 3 months at this point, and I'm happy to sit on this guitar for a while, and just play the market as needed. So far I've had 2 bites, and here I'm just being very open. I've had 2 bites on this guitar already, 2 offers from Reverb, and I've looked at these potential buyers, and they have great feedback both as buyers and sellers. One was for $9,400, another was for $11,000. Again, I'm working in my own interest. I'm trying to get as much for this guitar as I can. $18,000 is currently the lowest price on offer, and if someone really wants this guitar enough, they'll pay $18,000, or they'll offer me something that I think is reasonable, and I'll jump down. But as of now, I've declined offers for both $9,400 and $11,000. We'll see where time takes us. So here is a compendium. Oh no, we're cut off. Let me do some on-the-fly adjustments. There we go. Okay. Here is a compendium of Reverb listings, sold Reverb listings of the same model guitar, this PRS Chleo in charcoal purple. And I want to do apples to apples and keep it all restrained to charcoal purple. You can argue, oh, well, these other ones had a better flame top, or and I will say at least one of these I remember seeing had an immaculate flamed neck that I just felt really bad when I saw mine, and it was a plain maple neck. I was like, man, I wish I got the flamed maple neck version of this, but who knows? So these have gone for around $10,000. Interestingly, this one on the far right sold for, or at least it was listed for $18,200, and it is shown as sold. It was in the Netherlands. I don't know if this was, if someone sent this person an offer and it was for lower than $18,200 and they accepted that lower offer. I don't know if Reverb shows you that. What I do have is, jump over here. What I do have is what Reverb is showing as the transaction history, the sale price, the sale history for this model guitar. It roughly mirrors this sort of $9,000 to $10,000 range, with the most recent showing a last Christmas. I gave you my heart. No, last Christmas, someone sold it for someone bought it for $10,500, which is, again, as markup for a limited edition collector's guitar, above $6,850, that's reasonable. Is $18,000, super crazy? I don't know. Trogley's has his marked up for, I think, over $25,000. So I'm at least more reasonable than Trogley, and Trogley seems like a nice guy. So maybe I'm a super nice guy, keeping mine only at $18,000. So we'll see where the Strandberg and the PRS end up, but not trying to move price too much on them now. But of course, if you see my listings, feel free to shoot me an offer. The least I can, or the worst I can do, is say no. I try not to bite. So that was 5 guitars and 5 lessons. Again, a little bit of a different video than I usually have. Usually I'm making music instead of talking about guitars. But hopefully something for those of you out there who are maybe interested in selling on Reverb or haven't quite taken the plunge yet, and you just wanted sort of, one ordinary dude's one ordinary dude's thoughts and experiences, selling some of his, often loved, sometimes not as often loved guitars in the process. So thanks for watching.